Wisconsin might look like a place of farms and woods, but hidden below it all are very old secrets, buried mounds, underwater ruins, and rock carvings that don't fit the history we know. In this video, we are exploring Wisconsin's weirdest and most ancient puzzles. Let's begin. Aztalan State Park. If you're driving through southern Wisconsin, there's a piece of land near the little town of Lake Mills that might not catch your eye at first. It seems normal, just open fields, some trees here and there, maybe a deer far off. But if you stop, get out, and walk a bit, you'll find something odd, quiet, old, and totally surprising. This is Aztalan State Park, one of the most puzzling and forgotten archaeological spots in the Midwest. What remains here, some earthen mounds, bits of old wooden walls, and a few scattered objects, only hints at what was once a lively and advanced society. And the more you learn, the more the questions grow. Who built this? Why did they come here? And why did they leave so suddenly? The story of Aztalan starts around the year 1000, long before any European settlers arrived. This wasn't just a random spot in the forest. A group of people, part of what experts call the Mississippian culture, chose this place to build something important. They weren't wanderers or small tribes. They were organized, skilled, and linked to a much bigger network of towns and trade that spread across what is now the southeastern United States. Their main center was far to the south, in a huge city near today's St. Louis or Cahokia. So, the big puzzle is, why build Aztalan all the way up here, so far from the heart of their territory? Whatever the reason, they built something amazing. The site was over 20 acres with large flat-topped earth mounds, a central open plaza, and a tall wooden wall around everything. This wall wasn't just for protection. It probably had religious or ceremonial meaning. Inside, people grew corn, fished in the Crawfish River, made pottery, created tools, and took part in rituals we still don't fully understand. Archaeologists have found things like copper tools, decorative shell beads, and even materials that came from hundreds of miles away. This tells us Aztalan wasn't alone. These people were trading and talking across great distances. But then, just as fast as they appeared, they were gone. Around the year 1200, only about 200 years after they started, the people of Aztalan vanished. It wasn't a slow fade over many generations. The place seems to have been left in a hurry. The wooden walls were pulled down or burned. The mounds were left alone. Whatever once made this spot important spiritually, politically, or otherwise, just ended. And here's the strange part. There's no clear sign of war, no evidence of a huge natural disaster, no mass graves or proof of starvation. They didn't seem to be forced out. They simply left. Historians and archaeologists have ideas. Some think the climate may have changed, making it harder to farm. Others believe politics in the wider Mississippian world may have shifted, leaving Aztalan alone or cut off. Shortages of resources or fights within the group could have also played a part. But the truth is, we don't really know. They didn't leave any writing. No stone monuments, no carved messages, just the land shaped by human hands and the scattered traces of daily life. Pieces of pottery, ashes from fires, broken tools buried in the dirt. What makes it even harder is what happened after the site was empty. When European settlers came in the 1800s, they didn't understand what they were seeing. They made guesses, many of them wrong. One popular idea back then was that Aztalan had been built by the Aztecs from Mexico, which is where the name Aztalan comes from. Others said it was a lost city from the Book of Mormon. As you might guess, this led to some rough treatment of the land. Farmers plowed over the mounds, treasure seekers dug into them. Valuable artifacts were lost, broken, or sold. By the time Wisconsin made the site a state park for protection, a lot of damage had already been done. Still, what's left is powerful. Today, Aztalan State Park is quiet and calm. You can walk on grassy paths, climb up a rebuilt mound, and look out across the same view the original builders saw. There's a partial rebuild of the wooden wall, so you can sense the size and shape, but it's not flashy. There's no loud signs, no big visitor center, no crowds, just the sound of birds, leaves rustling, and maybe a fish jumping in the river. It feels timeless, like the kind of place where the past never fully lets go. One of the more unsettling parts of Aztalan's story is its rituals. Archaeologists have found clues that strongly suggest the people here held ceremonies involving fire, animal sacrifice, and possibly even human sacrifice. Some burial pits hold human bones that seem to have been placed with care, sometimes taken apart and put near ceremonial structures. It's hard to know exactly what these rituals meant or how often they happened. The clues point to a belief system where the spiritual world was central to daily life. And yet, the details of that belief system are lost. None of the modern Native American tribes in the area, like the Ho-Chunk, Potawatomi, or Menominee, have clear-spoken histories that directly connect to us. Many have stories of ancient mound builders, but there's no specific memory of this place. It's like the Aztalan people disappeared before they could pass on their story. What's left is a ghost of a culture, something you can see in pieces, but never fully understand. Adding even more mystery is nearby Rock Lake, just a few miles from Aztalan. People have talked about strange, pyramid-like shapes under the lake's surface. Some think these are man-made structures, possibly linked to the Aztalan builders. Could they have built ceremonial monuments underwater? Or are these shapes even older than us? No one knows for sure, but the timing and location make you wonder. It's another puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. Even the layout of Aztalan itself raises questions. Some researchers think the mounds and walls might have been lined up with events in the sky, maybe tracking the solstices or moon cycles. Others think the design was only for defense. Or maybe both. But again, we are left guessing. Every time we think we have a solid answer, another question takes its place. And maybe that's what makes Aztalan so interesting. It's not a place where you come to learn a neat, packaged history. It's a place that asks you to wonder, to imagine, to think about what it means for a whole culture to rise, thrive, and disappear. It leaves behind just enough to make you curious, but never enough to give you full satisfaction. Walking through Aztalan today doesn't feel like visiting a museum. It feels like stepping into a memory. There's something heavy in the air, not in a scary way, but in a way that makes you stop and pay attention. You can almost picture the people who once lived here, farming the land, meeting in the plaza, watching the stars from the top of a mound. Then, just like that, they were gone. Why they left, where they went, what they believe, those are questions we might never fully answer. But maybe that's okay. Some stories aren't meant to be finished. Some mysteries are there to remind us how much we still don't know and how much of the past is still hiding in plain sight. Aztalan is one of those places. Ordinary on the outside, extraordinary once you take the time to look. It's a reminder that even in the quiet fields of Wisconsin, history still whispers beneath your feet if you're willing to listen. The Sunken Pyramids of Rock Lake. Just a short drive from Aztalan State Park. There's a calm lake that fits right into the southern Wisconsin scenery. It doesn't look unusual. Families fish from the docks, kids paddle canoes, and people walk dogs along the shore. It's peaceful, ordinary, but if the old stories and sonar readings are right, there's something very strange resting at the bottom of Rock Lake. Something ancient, something shaped like pyramids. Locals have whispered about these underwater forms for over 100 years. Some call it Wisconsin's Atlantis. Others think they're just piles of rock left by glaciers, the kind you get after an ice age. Still, divers, researchers, and curious people keep coming back, hoping to solve the mystery once and for all. Are there really pyramids under Rock Lake? The earliest stories go back to the late 1800s, when people started saying they saw odd stone shapes on very clear water days. Fishermen claim they saw what looked like organized rows of stones. Some even said they resembled the outlines of sunken buildings or old temples. But it wasn't until the 1930s that the rumors got serious. That's when two men, Dr. W.C. McKern, an archaeologist from Milwaukee, and Frederick J. Coles, a local historian, said the formations weren't natural. They believed these were man-made pyramids, possibly connected to the Mississippian culture that built nearby. By their thinking, Rock Lake might have once been a sacred site, maybe even part of Aztalan's ceremonial world. Over time, they suggested, water levels rose, or big floods buried these structures under the lake. Coles even wrote a book arguing that local legends spoke of temples built to honor water spirits, what he called the temples of the water people. It wasn't all just talk. By the 1960s in Tujupulu, a wave of amateur divers began exploring the lake. Using basic scuba gear and early sonar, they searched the murky bottom for anything unusual. A few teams said they found what they were looking for. One structure kept coming up in their reports, often called Mound 34. It's described as pyramid-like, made from large stones, about 18 feet tall, with a flat top and slanted sides. Divers who said they saw it claimed the angles were too sharp, too perfect to be natural. One even called it unnervingly perfect, like something built on purpose. But there's a big problem with exploring Rock Lake. The visibility is awful. The water is full of silt, and the lake bed is soft and muddy. The moment a diver touches down, the mud stirs up and clouds the water. Even with good equipment, divers might only get a few seconds of clear sight before everything goes dark. So, reliable photos or video have been very hard to get over the years. Dozens of people have dived down there and come back with different stories. Some say they saw flat platforms, stacked stones, even steps. Others say there was nothing but random rocks and shadows. No one has brought up a confirmed artifact. No one has found a structure that can be studied closely, and the exact location seems to change depending on who tells the story. Doubters say it's all just wishful thinking. They say people are seeing leftover glacial debris piles of stones that happen to look symmetrical under the right light, or when you really want to see something. And to be fair, the whole region was shaped by glaciers. It's not strange for rock piles to form patterns by accident, but believers aren't so quick to dismiss it. They point to the reported sharp edges, the geometric shapes, and especially the stair-like patterns. Some divers have described features that seem out of place in a natural formation. Then there's the link to Aztalan. That site, just miles away, was built by people from the Mississippian culture, people known for building large, flat-topped mounds and ceremonial centers. Some researchers think Rock Lake might have been part of the same spiritual or cultural system. By this theory, the underwater structures could have been burial sites, sacred platforms, or even calendar markers. There are even claims that certain structures at Aztalan point toward Rock Lake, suggesting a deliberate alignment. Things got more interesting in the 1990s when a few private researchers used sonar to scan the lake bed. The scans weren't super clear, but they showed strange, angular shapes, rectangles, triangles, even patterns that looked like streets or a small underwater town. One scan seemed to show multiple structures, almost like a tiny, sunken village. None of these images have been reviewed by other experts, and no follow-up studies have confirmed them, but they added to the mystery. Some of the people involved were fringe researchers, the kind drawn to ideas of hidden civilizations. Still, the scans are out there, and they're odd enough to keep people wondering. Despite all this attention, official archaeological study has been limited. The lake is protected, and authorities are careful about disturbing the site without solid proof. That makes sense. Without physical evidence, no artifacts, no carvings, no stone tools, it's hard to justify a costly underwater dig. And so, the mystery stays mostly untouched. But that hasn't stopped the curious. Journalists, amateur archaeologists, YouTubers, and TV crews have all shown up over the years, hoping to be the ones to solve the case. Some leave convinced they saw something real. Others leave disappointed. Sure, it's all just a local legend, helped by bad visibility and good stories. One idea that keeps returning is that the pyramids weren't covered by accident, they were meant to be there. In ancient cultures around the world, water often played a central role in ceremonies. In some places, temples were flooded on purpose as part of spiritual rituals. Could the builders of Aztalan have done something similar? Maybe these structures were built at the edge of a much smaller lake, or even on dry land, and later swallowed by rising water. Geologists have found clues that water levels in this region may have risen over time. If that's true, the pyramids might have once been visible, visited, and even used. Today, Rock Lake doesn't advertise its mystery. There are no signs telling you about sunken pyramids, no more docks, marked ancient ruins below. It's just a quiet lake with a few stories passed down through generations. People in town still talk about it, especially older residents who say they knew someone who saw something strange down there. It's the kind of legend that stays alive, not through science or proof, but through memory and curiosity. And maybe that's what makes the Rock Lake pyramids so compelling. It's not just about whether they're real, it's about why we care so much. Why do stories like this stay with us? Why are we so drawn to the idea that something forgotten lies just below the surface? Maybe it's because places like Rock Lake remind us that the world still holds secrets, that history doesn't always give up its answers easily, that sometimes the mystery itself is the most powerful part of the story. So, for now, the pyramids of Rock Lake remain hidden, covered in mud, blurred by silt, protected by silence. But they're still there in old divers' tales, in fuzzy sonar images, in the shared imagination of a small Wisconsin town. Whether they're man-made or just a trick of the rocks, they continue to spark wonder, and that alone might be worth something. The Mound of Sauk County. In a quiet corner of Sauk County, Wisconsin, there's a park you could easily pass by if you weren't looking for it. No tall stones, no signs shouting ancient mystery, just a gentle rise in the land shaped like a person. Literally, it's called the Man Mound, and it might be one of the most unusual ancient sites in North America. This grassy earthwork, over 1,000 years old, is the only known effigy mound in the shape of a full human figure. That alone makes it special. But what really keeps people coming is how little we actually know about it. Who built it, what it meant, and why it's still here. Effigy mounds aren't new in this part of the country. Native cultures that lived in the upper Midwest built thousands of them. Huge shapes molded from the earth. Most are animals, birds, bears, snakes. Some are huge, only fully visible from above. They weren't just decorations. They likely held spiritual meaning or marked sacred spaces. But the Man Mound isn't shaped like any known animal. It's human, or at least human-like, and that's very rare. This figure stretches about 214 feet from head to toe, with arms out and knees slightly bent, like it's moving or about to stand up. There's something purposeful in its posture. What really catches people's eye though, are the small details. The figure seems to have horns, or a headdress, maybe even a belt, or a kind of garment around the waist. That's not the kind of detail you add by accident. It suggests this wasn't just any person. It might have been a spiritual being, a god, or a mythical figure. We'll probably never know for sure, because the people who made it didn't leave any written records. They passed their stories down through spoken traditions, generation to generation. But with colonization, much of that knowledge was lost. Today, even the Ho-Chunk Nation, whose ancestral lands include this region, aren't certain who exactly built it or what it meant. They have their own deep traditions tied to effigy mounds, sky spirits, and sacred beings. But for this specific figure, the meaning is still a mystery. And honestly, we almost lost the Man Mound completely. Back in the 1800s, European American settlers came and saw the land as farmland, not a sacred place. In the late 19th century, a road was built that cut right through the lower part of the figure. The feet were destroyed. Then came fences, power lines, and buildings. Little by little, the mound was being erased, as if it didn't matter. Thankfully, in 1908, a group of concerned locals stepped in. They saw this was something worth saving. They raised money, bought the land, and created what's now Man Mound Park. It was one of the first real efforts to preserve an indigenous effigy site in the US in more recent years. The missing legs were redrawn on the road using white paint, just to give visitors a better idea of the original shape. It's a small fix, but it helps. If you visit today, the park is simple. There's a small sign, a walking trail, and a raised viewing platform where you can get a better look. From the ground, it's hard to see the full shape, but once you go up higher, it starts to make sense. You can trace the arms, the head, the bend in the knees. The figure looks peaceful yet powerful, human, but just strange enough to feel otherworldly. And that's the feeling most people walk away with. You're not just looking at a mound of dirt. You're standing face to face with a question that's over 1,000 years old. Was this a sky god? A warrior? A shaman? Some have guessed the horns might actually be antlers, linking the figure to deer or elk animals tied to fertility or the changing seasons. Others think it could show a horned serpent deity, a powerful figure in many Native American stories. The truth is, we just don't know, and that's frustrating, but also kind of humbling. Whoever built this didn't do it casually. It would have taken a lot of time, effort, and teamwork. They moved tons of earth basket by basket, shaping the figure with surprising care. It wasn't done in a weekend. It took planning, probably ceremony, definitely meaning. They left the shape in the land for a reason, one they thought would outlast them. And in some ways, it did. Despite the damage, despite the road that runs through it, the Man Mound is still here. It's been named a National Historic Landmark. There's growing interest in reconnecting Native communities to sites like this. With more cultural teamwork and research, the Ho-Chunk Nation has been part of those efforts, working to make sure this sacred place gets the respect it deserves. But even with new attention, the mystery remains. And maybe that's okay. Not every question needs an answer. Some things are meant to be remembered, not solved. The Man Mound doesn't speak through words. It speaks through presence, through shape, through silence. When you're there, you feel it. You hear the wind in the grass. You look at the gentle curve of the earth, and you start to wonder, what else have we missed? What other stories are buried just below the surface? In a way, the Man Mound isn't just about the past. It's a reminder that the land itself has memory, that long before there were highways, farms, or property lines. People lived here. People who dreamed, built, and believed. They left their mark not in books, but in the shape of the ground itself. And that's powerful. Because even after 1,000 years, even with pieces missing and answers out of reach, the man mound is still here, quietly asking us to see the world through older eyes, and to respect the stories we may never fully understand. The mystery of the driftless area. There is a strange part of the American Midwest, where the glaciers just didn't go. It covers a piece of southwestern Wisconsin, and spreads into parts of Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. This region is called the driftless area, and it's a geological oddity. Rough, hilly, and totally different from the flat plains around it. While most of the Midwest was flattened by huge ice sheets during the last ice age, this one pocket of land somehow escaped untouched. It almost feels like it was skipped on purpose. And what's left is one of the most mysterious, biologically rich, and archaeologically fascinating places in North America. Most people don't realize how unusual that is. Glaciers shaped nearly the entire northern United States. As they moved, they scraped the land flat, and left behind piles of rocks and sediment called drift, hence the name driftless. But here, in this isolated zone, there's no drift, no glacial scars, just ancient landforms that seem to belong to another world. Scientists still argue about exactly why the glaciers missed this area. Some think the ice sheets split and flowed around the higher ground. Others believe the region had a cold, dry microclimate that acted like a natural shield. No one is completely sure, but whatever the reason, the result is land that's far older, more rugged, and more mysterious than anything nearby. Instead of endless farmland, the driftless area is full of steep valleys, rocky ridges, sinkholes, and twisting rivers. The Kickapoo and Wisconsin rivers carve deep gorges through limestone bluffs. Hills rise up suddenly from rolling fields. The landscape feels dramatic, almost like you've stepped into another part of the country. And that's just the surface. This place is ancient. Some of the exposed rock in the driftless area dates back more than 500 million years, to when this was all covered by a shallow sea. Fossils of trilobites and other sea creatures still show up in the cliffs. Over time, erosion carved out the ridges and hollows we see today. It's a landscape that feels raw and wild, like a look into Earth's deep past. And humans have been part of that story for a very long time. People started living here at least 12,000 years ago, right after the glaciers pulled back. Native American tribes built effigy, mounds, giant earthworks, shaped like animals or symbols. They buried their dead in sacred hills and passed down stories about spirits in the rocks and rivers. The Ho-Chunk Dakota and others still hold this land sacred. Their traditions carry echoes of a deep spiritual connection to this place. But what makes the driftless area truly strange is how much of it is still unmapped and largely unexplored. Under those rocky hills are cave systems, some we've never fully mapped. Sinkholes can open up without warning. Ancient rock shelters, high on the cliffs, have revealed pottery, tools, and carvings, and there are more that haven't even been found yet. There are also weirder stories. Rock carvings that appear and disappear with the sunlight. Lights seen floating over the valleys at night. People talk about spots where sound echoes in odd ways or where compasses don't work right. These tales might sound like folklore, but they're surprisingly consistent. Passed down through generations by people who've lived in the driftless for a long time. Take Treasure Cave, for example. By old stories, it was found in the 1800s, hidden in a limestone bluff in Crawford County. People claimed there were strange symbols carved into its walls, symbols no one could read. Some thought it was a burial chamber. Others believed it held gold or ancient objects. But today, no one agrees on where it was, or even if it was real. Like so many driftless legends, it hangs in that space between myth and mystery. Another fascinating part of this region is the huge number of ancient mounds. Many are shaped like animals, birds, bears, snakes, even people. These weren't just burial sites. Their placement suggests they were lined up with the stars or used for ceremonies. Some researchers think the layout of the mounds forms a kind of map of the stars' massive, Earth-sized calendar that helped ancient people track seasons, honor ancestors, and mark spiritual events. If that's true, it means the people who built them had a deep understanding of both the land and the sky. Yet, despite all this, the driftless area remains hard to study, not from a lack of interest, but because the land is so tough. You can't just drive through it or scan it with satellites like you can with flat farmland. The hills are steep, the forest is thick, and the limestone is delicate. Even advanced LiDAR scans have trouble seeing through the tree cover to find what's hiding below. It's a landscape that seems to guard its secrets. That's probably why some unusual theories have gained a following over the years. There are people mostly outside mainstream archaeologies who think the driftless might have been home to civilizations that lived here long before the Ice Age. They point to stone formations that don't seem natural, patterns in mound placement that hint at mathematical knowledge, even claims of underground stone chambers or ancient megaliths. These ideas are controversial and lack solid proof. But the fact that people still ask these questions says a lot about how unusual the region really is. More recently, researchers have focused on the karst topography of the driftless. That's the kind of landscape formed when water slowly dissolves limestone, creating underground rivers, caves, and sinkholes. It's an incredibly active and changing environment. Every few years, a new cave system is found, some with chambers that haven't seen daylight in tens of thousands of years. It's not hard to imagine what else might be buried down there. Even the plant and animal life in the driftless is unique. Cold water trout streams run through the valleys. Rare ferns and Ice Age survivor plants grow in isolated spots. Some species here are found nowhere else in Wisconsin. It's like the glaciers pushed everything aside, and this little patch got to keep its original ecosystem. In many ways, it feels more like a protected time capsule than part of the modern Midwest. And maybe that's the heart of the mystery. It's not just that the glaciers miss this place, it's what's here because of it. Ancient cultures, untold legends, unique ecosystems, a landscape that feels older, more alive, and more untamed than anything around it. The past isn't buried deep here, it's lying right on the surface, waiting to be noticed. Today, people visit the driftless area for all sorts of reasons. Hiking, fishing, cave, exploring. Some come for the views, others for the legends. But no matter why you come, there's one thing you feel almost immediately. The land is different. It doesn't feel like a place shaped by chance. It feels like it was left this way on purpose. And when you leave, you're left wondering why. The cave art of Burnt Bluff. Along the quiet shoreline of northern Lake Michigan, where pine trees cling to steep cliffs and the wind whispers through the trees, there's a place most people have never heard of. It's called Burnt Bluff, tucked away on Wisconsin's Garden Peninsula. It doesn't look like much at first. A ridge of weathered limestone rising from the forest floor. But once you step closer, once you know what's hidden inside, it becomes something much more. This isn't just pretty land. It might be one of the most mysterious and sacred sites in the Great Lakes region. Thousands of years ago, people came here for reasons we're still trying to understand. Today, Burnt Bluff is mostly silent, surrounded by wilderness. But long ago, someone used this remote spot as a kind of message board, maybe a ceremonial space, maybe even something like an ancient library. Because inside the dark, cool caves carved into the rock are some of the oldest known pieces of cave art in this part of the country. Now, these aren't just scratches or graffiti left by explorers. These are meaningful, symbolic marks. Images painted carefully in red ochre, some carved right into the stone. They weren't meant for fun. They weren't random. Whoever made them had something to say. And, for reasons we may never fully know, they chose Burnt Bluff as the place to say it. What's interesting is how few people know about this place. And that's partly on purpose. Archaeologists and local tribes have chosen not to advertise the exact location. They're protecting it, because once a site like this gets too well known, it risks being harmed. Over the years, similar sites have been vandalized or simply worn down by too many visitors. Burnt Bluff has stayed mostly untouched, and that's likely the only reason these ancient markings have survived. Based on current research, the cave art could be anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 years old, or maybe even older. It's thought to have been made by ancestors of the Menominee and Ojibwe peoples, but the exact origin isn't totally clear. That's the thing with places like this. There are still a lot of questions. What we do know is that the figures include animals, geometric designs, handprints, and strange beings that look part human, part something else. The red color used in many of the paintings is red ochre, a natural mineral made from iron oxide. It's been used in spiritual and artistic practices all over the world for thousands of years. And in these caves, sheltered from wind, rain, and sun, the ochre has lasted. Shine a light on the cave walls, and the symbols still glow faintly red, as if they were drawn not centuries ago, but maybe just yesterday. There's a stillness in those caves, a quiet that feels different. You can tell this wasn't just a place to sleep or hide from bad weather. The art's location deep inside the bluff suggests these caves had spiritual meaning. They might have been seen as portals, places where the spirit world and the human world came together. Painting on these walls could have been part of a ceremony, a vision quest, a healing ritual, or maybe a way to talk with ancestors. Some images show creatures that seem to blend animal and human forms. In stories passed down by regional tribes, there are legends of transformational beings, figures that change shape or act as messengers between the living and the spirit world. Other symbols look like stars or sky maps. And then there are the handprints. You can almost picture someone standing there, placing a hand on the stone, marking a moment in time. Maybe it was part of an initiation rite. Maybe it meant, I was here, I belonged. But we don't know for sure. And that's what makes Burnt Bluff so compelling. Even researchers admit much of what they think is still just educated guesswork. Indigenous rock art doesn't follow the same logic as modern writing. A single image might have many meanings, depending on who made it, why they made it, or what was happening in their world at the time. Without that context, outsiders are left trying to piece together a story from fragments. That's why archaeologists have started to take a more respectful approach. Instead of digging or testing or scraping the walls, they're preserving what's there and working with tribal elders. Some elders say their ancestors knew about the caves and passed down knowledge through spoken traditions. But over time, those stories faded, worn away by colonization, displacement, and forced assimilation. Burnt Bluff isn't alone, either. It's part of a much larger landscape, full of sacred sites, burial mounds, standing stones, other rock shelters. They all dot the nearby shoreline. It's likely ancient people traveled along ceremonial routes, following the seasons, the stars, or spiritual callings. Burnt Bluff might have been one stop on a bigger journey, a place to reflect, connect, or receive a vision. And when you visit, the place itself tells you that story in its own quiet way. The wind pushes through the trees. The cliffs rise like stone walls guarding something precious. From the top, you can see for miles. Lake Michigan stretching to the horizon. The caves are hidden in the folds of the bluff, cool and shadowed, easy to miss unless you know where to look. Standing there, you start to understand why someone thousands of years ago might have felt this was a sacred place. Even now, the full layout and number of cave paintings remains a mystery. And maybe that's for the best. Some places aren't meant to be tourist attractions. Some stories need silence. What we do know is that the art is very real, incredibly old, and filled with meaning given. If that meaning is something we can only guess at. There are people who believe the markings might be part of a larger, forgotten communication system, maybe something like a symbolic language used by tribes across the upper Midwest. Others think the symbols could line up with events in the sky. Solstices, moon cycles, star positions. These are exciting ideas, but so far no one has been able to prove them. Without written records, and with many traditions lost over time, Burnt Bluff keeps its secrets. Today, the site is protected. Access is limited, and unlike other ancient sites ruined by careless visitors, Burnt Bluff still rests mostly in peace. The silence of the cave shields it, the shadows keep it safe. And that's the heart of the mystery here. Burnt Bluff isn't just a place frozen in time. It's a message left behind by someone who wanted to be remembered. Someone who stood in that same cave, holding pigment, and marked the wall for reasons that still echo across the years. Maybe we'll never know exactly what they were trying to say. But that doesn't mean we stop listening, because history doesn't always come to us in books or scrolls or stone tablets. Sometimes it waits in the dark, painted in red, glowing softly against the limestone. And sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we can't quite explain. Lake Superior copper mines. If you ever hike the rough trails around Lake Superior, or take a boat toward Isle Royale, you might notice odd shapes in the ground. Pits, trenches, shallow holes. They don't look like much at first, just quiet scars on the landscape. But those shapes are the remains of something ancient. Prehistoric copper mines that go back thousands of years before cities, before written records in this region. Someone was already pulling pure copper from the earth. And that leads to a big question. Who were they? How did they do it? And what happened to all that copper? Archaeologists have found strong evidence that native peoples were mining copper around Lake Superior as far back as 6,000 years ago. This time is called the Old Copper Complex. It's considered one of the earliest known metalworking cultures in the world. People back then weren't just picking up loose nuggets, they were digging deep. They were breaking through bedrock, using fire and stone tools, and hauling copper out in what looks like a long-term, organized effort. The sheer size of it is hard to grasp. On Isle Royale alone, over 5,000 ancient mining pits have been found. And that's just one area. Altogether, estimates suggest as much as 500,000 tons of copper may have been taken out over the centuries. Now, here's where it gets strange. We know copper was mined, and we've found some copper artifacts, tools, fish hooks, bracelets, spear points, but not nearly enough to explain where all that copper went. Most of it is missing. So, naturally, people have questions. One explanation is that a lot of the copper simply rusted or broke down over time. Another theory says it was traded across ancient North America, scattered into countless objects that haven't survived or haven't been found. That's possible. Trade routes stretched for hundreds, even thousands of miles. Items moved between cultures through complex networks. But then there's the theory that makes people pause, that ancient people from across the Atlantic, from Europe or the Mediterranean, may have traveled to North America during the Bronze Age and taken huge amounts of copper back with them. It sounds far-fetched, and most archaeologists don't buy it, but it's a theory that won't completely go away. The idea is that ancient sailors, like the Minoans, Phoenicians, or some other Old World civilization, reached the Great Lakes looking for copper. Bronze, after all, is made from copper and tin, and copper was always in high demand back then. The copper in this region is unusually pure, about 99%, which would have made it very attractive. By this idea, these explorers either mined themselves or made deals with native groups, then shipped it back to Europe. There are a lot of holes in this theory, starting with the lack of physical evidence. No old-world tools, ships, or writings have ever been found in the area. Most mainstream researchers say the idea doesn't hold up, but they do admit one thing. The scale of ancient mining here is impressive, and it's hard to explain why there's such a huge gap between the amount of copper removed and the amount of artifacts we've found. What we do know is how the mining worked. These weren't quick digs. Ancient miners used stone hammers and heated the rock with fire to crack it open, then poured cold lake water over it to make it shatter. They used birch bar containers to carry out the rubble. This took real effort, exhausting work that had to be repeated for generations. The people doing this knew what they were doing. But here's something puzzling. There's no sign of a major settlement around these mining sites. No large housing areas, no big tool-making centers, no burial grounds connected to a copper society. That's unusual. If this was such a major industry, why don't we see more evidence of the people who ran it? Some archaeologists think these groups were seasonal visitors. Maybe they didn't live there year-round. They came in the summer, mined what they needed, then left. Others think the copper got spread far and wide, used in trade or ritual, broken into objects that didn't survive. Then there are the stories of underground tunnels, hidden shafts near Copper Harbor, and other remote spots. Some are sealed or flooded, others too unstable to explore. A few early 20th century researchers claimed to have found copper ingots buried near the mine-shaped blocks of metal that didn't match the known tools of native cultures. But most of these stories are based on word of mouth. The artifacts, if they ever existed, haven't turned up in museums. That hasn't stopped people from wondering what else might be hidden under the forests and shorelines of Lake Superior. Places like Isle Royale are protected today, and large-scale digs aren't allowed. Many areas are sacred to local native communities, and for good reason, to the Ojibwe and other indigenous groups. This land isn't just about ancient tools, it's part of a living history. In their traditions, copper is more than a resource, it's sacred. It's a gift from the earth, used carefully and with purpose. From this view, the mystery isn't really about where the copper went. It's about how modern mines sometimes miss the point. Not everything was about production or economy. Sometimes copper was meant for ceremony, not commerce. If you visit these places today, it's not like stepping into a theme park. There are no signs or reenactments. Most of the pits and mine sites are hidden under moss and trees. You might spot a hammerstone, if you know what to look for, a smooth, round rock with flattened edges, or maybe a faint green shine where copper has rusted in the cracks. But more often, you'll just see forest, quiet woods, a chill in the air off the lake, maybe a few birds calling overhead. It's peaceful, but also a little eerie. You're standing where people worked for thousands of years, and most of that history has been forgotten. And maybe that's what makes it so compelling. The mystery isn't wrapped up in conspiracy or treasure hunting. It's in the hard questions that don't have clear answers. Who were these miners really? How far did their trade networks reach? And how did they organize something this big, this effective, without leaving behind more of a footprint? In the end, what's left are the rocks, the pits, the hammerstones, scattered in the dirt. The clues are there, but they don't give up their secrets easily. And maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe some stories are meant to stay grounded in the land, shared quietly by those who still remember, and explored slowly by those willing to look beyond the surface. Because beneath the surface of Lake Superior's calm waters and rocky shores lies one of North America's oldest industrial mysteries, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. The Sheboygan Stonehenge. Just off the shore of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, under the cold, choppy waters of Lake Michigan, lies one of the state's lesser-known and most unusual mysteries. Something a few divers and researchers have called the Sheboygan Stonehenge. It's not an official name, and the site isn't marked on tourist maps or recognized by major archaeological groups. But according to divers who have explored this patch of lakebed, there's a curious formation of large stones down there, placed in a way that seems too deliberate to be natural. The story first got attention in the early 2000s when sonar scans during a survey project picked up odd shapes on the lake bottom near Sheboygan. The shapes didn't look like shipwreck pieces or typical rock formations. Some appeared upright, like pillars. Others seemed arranged in a circle or arc, sparking quick comparisons to England's famous Stonehenge. A few divers went down to look closer, and what they found was strange enough to keep the idea alive. A series of large, heavy stones set vertically, some with flat surfaces or balanced in odd positions. One stone reportedly had a carved image on it, described as looking like a mastodon or mammoth. That detail, if real, would be huge. Carvings of extinct Ice Age animals aren't just rare, they're nearly unheard of in this part of North America. But that claim is still argued about. Only a handful of people have seen the stone up close, and the water conditions cold, dark and murky make it almost impossible to study properly. No clear photo has ever been shown to the public. Skeptics say this so-called Sheboygan Stonehenge is likely a natural rock formation, possibly left by glacial movements that dropped boulders into strange patterns as they melted. Others point out that the bottom of Lake Michigan has plenty of odd geological features, shelves, ridges, that can take on unexpected shapes, especially when seen on sonar. Still, the idea of a submerged stone circle, made by ancient people, continues to spark interest. Supporters of the theory believe the stone arrangement could date back as far as 10,000 years, to a time when lake levels were lower, and the area now underwater may have been dry land, possibly even lived on by early pil. If true, the site would be older than the pyramids and possibly one of the earliest ceremonial structures in North America. That's a huge claim, but it rests on very limited evidence. There is also the problem of access and verification. The exact location of the site is kept quiet, partly to preserve it and partly to keep amateur divers from disturbing the area. The few dives that have happened were under strict conditions, and the findings remain unofficial. Some images have been shared in private groups, but nothing has been reviewed by other experts or published in academic journals. The Sheboygan Stonehenge has since become a kind of quiet legend, a whisper in the local diving community and a curiosity among fringe theorists. Some link it to other supposed underwater oddities in the Great Lakes, like structures found near Traverse City, Michigan, or deeper areas in Lake Huron. These theories suggest a prehistoric civilization once lived in the no-submerged lands between present-day Michigan and Wisconsin, building stone circles, animal effigies, or astronomical markers. To be fair, the idea isn't completely impossible. We know that, after the last ice age, large parts of what are now the Great Lakes were dry. Ancient people did live in these areas, leaving behind tools, hunting camps, and even burial mounds. It's entirely possible they marked certain spots with stone arrangements. But whether the Sheboygan site is one of those spots or just a strange pile of boulders is still unknown. From a modern-day view, the site is basically off-limits to the general public. There are no signs on the shore, no guided tours, and no official acknowledgement. The mystery lives mostly online and through word of mouth, and that gives it a kind of eerie charm. An unsolved puzzle sitting just offshore, invisible from the beach, but close enough to make you wonder what's really down there. If you visit Sheboygan today, you'd never suspect a thing. The lake looks as it always has, blue, cold, and restless. Families play in the sand. boats drift along the horizon. But just below that surface, not far from the everyday world, might be one of Wisconsin's oldest and strangest secrets.